an anecdote or a story or two about Henry. I
About
never met.
Henry?
Yeah, I never met him, and I've heard a few, but
Mm,
I not many.
no.
Can you give me your
He loved to
s-
talk about, he was 12 years old when he first, as far as I remember the stories, when he first started to work in the woods. And Dad, when he was a teenager, had extreme acne, and he didn't like to go and apply for a job. So his brother Theodore, would apply for the jobs in the woods, and then Dad would take it because he was shy of his acne.
and that would be chopping trees down,
Lumberjack.
lumberjack.
Lumberjack, yeah.
Lumberjack.
And he said one of the things, they had to have the roads really slippery to haul out the logs with trees. The horses would be pulling these. And if the road wasn't slippery, the snow was fluffy or something, somebody had to pour water on the road. And it would be real cold, so it would freeze. And boy, the sleds would really go down down that way. And he, being 12, and the first job he had was doing that. And then when they were married, of course, he had to make the wood to burn in the stoves, and he cleared a lot of land, made big fields of potatoes and that. And when you clear land, first you get the trees out in the bush. And he used to tease Mother, I'm going quite a ways away, and I'm chopping down trees. And it might get dark early tonight because when there's a lot of chips in the air, it gets dark quicker. Oh, does it? She said. And she had a seashell that it was big, that she could blow, and she would blow that when she had the supper ready or the dinner ready. And he could hear it way out where he was.
Oh.
Do you know if there was any problem because of the difference in their age? You know that
Yeah, he was 12 years older than
yeah.
she. Yeah.
Do you know if that created any problems? That there were maybe like the story you're telling me that maybe she was naive about some things because she was younger.
That's true. But he worshipped her. And she was very good, I thought, going in the bush with, and of course she was, their home was so poor where she lived. They had 8 or 9 children, I guess. Anyway, she soon went into a restaurant and became a very good waitress at the age of 15 or 14. And they never wrote down what you were getting. I heard you say last night you like to have a waitress write it down. And
Yeah.
she said we had to remember 3 or 4 of them.
Couldn't write.
Yeah. And then Theodore and Aggie were out where Dad finally got the homestead. And they wanted her to come there and stay with them when she was going to have a baby. Theodore's wife, Aggie, I guess. So she left her job and went out and stayed with them. And then that's where she met Dad.
Oh, you mean she knew Theodore
Before.
and Aggie first? Did she know?
Right.
Was she friends with Aggie or Theodore?
Was Aggie her sister?
Oh, okay. Aggie was
Mother's sister.
Mabel's sister. Okay.
Yeah, Mabel's sister, yeah.
So she stayed with Aggie, and then Henry stopped by.
Well, then Henry and Dad and Theodore were cutting wood, as far as I can remember. It took a lot of wood to keep the little shacks warm.
Yeah.
And I don't know, oh yeah, if they had a cow, then the cream would go in these great big cans, and they sold sour cream. And we used to get sour cream butter, which we liked better than the other butter, made with sour cream. And they got money that way. And you go into town and charge the groceries that you needed, which was flour and sugar, just the basics. And then you'd pay your bill at the end of the year. And when you went to town to pay your bill with the money you'd collected over the summer, the grocery man would always put in a bag of hard candy. That was the bonus for paying your bill, I guess. But more stories about Dad. He had a good sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah. I used to love to hear him sing. Almost kind of yodel-like.
Yeah.
went around the barn and,
We do that at Christmas time sometimes.
Yeah.
We would sing at Christmas time, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
He met Mother, he said when he thinks back, he can remember he was 12, and then I think when he was about 16 or in there, he used to like to hold her. She was just a little girl, pretty little girl, and he liked Mabel. And then years and years went between them, and met her again.
It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what did he died when he was 79? What did he die of? Just old age, or was it a heart murmur, or what was it?
I don't know. I think it was hard.
Something heart related. I thought it was a heart murmur or something.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
heart was enlarged or something, I thought.
And then he had some kind of a bladder infection.
Mm.
That's why he was in the hospital.
Okay.
So what year was that?
I got it written down, but he died when he was 79.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
My
have
mom was 96. Wasn't
Oh, I
she?
think you said yesterday it was 63
Yeah, could have
when
been.
he died. 1963.
I don't know. I was home at that time.
Yeah, you were
I mean,
home with him.
I
yeah.
came home.
Yeah, yeah. And then Mom died when she was, what, 96, I think, wasn't she?
Well, I think it was 95. She was
95,
born
okay.
in 1886.
Yeah, correct, that's right.
And she got that mixed up with her age, but I think
Okay.
she was 95.
95, okay.
Yeah.
One of the funniest stories I remember was when we lived in Bemidji in 1000 Mississippi Avenue. Is my dad loved trees. Henry loved trees, and so he just loved.
Always a pine tree.
He loved blue spruce.
Yeah.
And in the yard that we had, it was in a corner lot. He planted these blue spruce, and when I was a young kid, he would take me in the woods, and we had buckets, and we would dig these trees up, and we would bring them back to Bemidji, and he planted them around the house. And the house had a bank going up like this here. It was hard to mow because you had to long,
Oh.
and he would put the blue trees around the house. And they were just gorgeous. And my mom liked those. But then right out in front of her kitchen window was an elm tree. And this elm tree was very, very large. And the elm tree grew, and it had branches and everything, and it shaded the window when she looked out to wash dishes. She hated that elm tree.
Oh.
And she wanted that elm tree. She said, Henry, I want you to take this elm tree down. He says, I don't want to take that tree down. She said, I like that tree very, very much. I don't want to take that tree down. And she kept asking him, he wouldn't take it down. And then all of a sudden, the tree started dying. And all of a sudden, she said, you should cut some of those branches off. She says, because they're dying. He says, this is the strangest thing, how this tree has just started dying. I don't know why this tree's dying, but he says, I'll cut some of the branches off. He cut some of the branches off, and then she could see through the window. And it turns out that afterwards, she told me or told Henry that she had poured salt water every day on the base of the tree. She would get done with the dishes or something, she would take the water, and she would put salt in the water, and she would go outside, and she would put it in the base of the tree to find that the damn tree died. And I never forgot that. I thought that was not very nice, but anyway, that's what she did. And then I remember when Mom and Dad would fight.
Oh,
and they would
yes.
argue. And he was very quiet. He
Yeah.
didn't raise his voice much. And she would start going after, Henry, you have to do this. And Henry, the kid's doing this, and you got to do this. He would just sit there and listen. And finally he would say, Mabel, that's enough.
Oh.
And when he would say, Mabel, that's enough, she shut right up and left the room. That's all they had to say is, Mabel, that's enough. And that was it.
Yeah.
And she would be quiet and she would leave the room. She would say nothing more. That was it.
I remember one time she decided that stuff was accumulating too much, it all ended up upstairs. So she said, I'll throw it out the upstairs window and into the back of the wagon or the truck, whatever, and you haul it away. So she was throwing it on and throwing it on. He was taking it and hauling it in the basement.
In the basement. Yeah.
He never could throw anything
Yeah,
away.
he wouldn't. In the basement, he would save everything because of his fear of the recession or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
depression. They
Yeah,
saved everything.
yeah.
He saved all the lumber. He saved the Hilux bottles, the gum wrappers. He saved it all in the basement.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Remember I told you a couple of days ago. He saved everything.
Yeah.
Mom used to can everything, and peaches and
Yeah.
pears and it's like,
But it was hard for her because she came in that community
yeah,
and she didn't speak Norwegian.
yeah.
And the church and everything, Ladies' Aid and all that stuff was Norwegian.
Norwegian, yeah.
Mm.
And she loved to get out among people.
Yeah.
So she would go to the Ladies' Aid, and she said to Dad one time, I don't understand what they're saying, but I get the funniest feeling they're talking about me. He said, they are.
Did Henry speak Norwegian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
He
I
spoke
really,
Norwegian, yeah.
we used to beg him to teach us Norwegian, but due to her not understanding it, he said, it isn't spoken in this house. So,
See, we're gonna do the opposite
Yeah.
yeah.
with our child.
Mhm. But you see, he came across in a boat from wherever the boats left from, Norway,
Yeah.
and there was a storm on the ocean, so the trip was about 2 weeks longer than they were planned,
Wow.
and there was not enough food, and it was a rough. He was 2 years old. Grandma used to tell about the crossing.
That was a steamship, right?
A what?
It was a steamship. Is that right? Does that
I don't
sound-
know.
Probably a steamship, but they came into Ellis Island.
Yeah. Oh. And Mother loved to dance. She and her brother John, they used to win waltz.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Ah.
yeah. She loved to dance.
Uh-huh.
She and John were good dancers. Well, Dad didn't.
He didn't dance, I remember that.
But
yeah.
there was a lot of square dancing, and he called it square
Oh
dancing.
my goodness,
Yeah.
huh?
I used to love to hear him sing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
What were Mabel's siblings' names?
I was the oldest, and then my sister Viola.
No. Mabel had. You said she had a brother John,
Oh yeah,
and then a sister married to Theo.
yeah. And
Who
then
was-
she had a sister Alice and Marianne, and then she had another brother, Joe. I think it was Joe.
Langen. And who was married to Theo again?
Aggie.
Aggie.
Yeah, that was her sister. There was a large family. I wouldn't remember all of them. I think there were just the 2 boys.
And her dad, he was kind of not around after a while. Is that?
Her dad was all Irish, and he didn't hear. He was really deaf. And Mother said she said he was mean. So a Sunday morning he'd give all the kids a fairly good spanking because they probably done things during the week that he didn't know about.
Oh no.
I don't know if that's true.
Oh.
And then the kids didn't like the crust of the bread, and he made them eat that crust. Couldn't go with it. And Mother said there was a ledge on the dining room table, and they all passed their crust along to their mother, and she ate the crust. Because he didn't see that well either, I guess.
Mm.
I never heard much about him.
How about Mabel's mom?
Her mom was very good. I think she was more Dutch than, and she died. I suppose it was hard, kind of suddenly once.
And what town did they grow up in?
Park Rapids,
Hmm.
around in there someplace, yeah. And of course, Grandma didn't like the fact that Dad got married at all because he was taking care of her, and when he got any money, he took care of her and the family, and then she soon moved out where Dad had the homestead, because I remember she would come she'd tell Mabel, you're not any good, you don't make that bread very good, and your butter's still got salt in it, instead of helping her. But then they later on became very good friends.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about Marion?
Yes,
Hmm.
and she'd come with her horse and buggy in the summer, and then with the sleigh in the winter. She could hitch up the little pony, and
Where would she come from?
where her homestead was quite a ways from Dad's. The government gave land, didn't they?
Yeah.
They gave land for the homestead, and Dad lived by Cass Lake in a town called Pennington, by Cass Lake, and that was like 30 miles east of Bemidji, Minnesota.
Yeah.
30 miles east.
Ole, you mean?
No, Henry.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where Ole and Marion was, whether they were in the same area or someplace, I don't know.
It seemed like a long ways, because they'd go with a horse.
I just know that Ole and Marion had a bunch of sons, and the sons were the Gregerson lumberjacks.
Oh,
and they used to lumber together, and there was Henry, there was Jalmer, and there was Alfred,
Edwin?
and there was Edwin, I think one other, I think there was 5 or 6 brothers. And they used to get contracts for clearing land. And it was axes, and then it was the crosscut saws, no chainsaws, obviously. And so they were sort of like the Gregerson lumberjacks. And my dad used to tell about the story about the Gregerson boys. They would go and cut the wood, and clear the woods in the forest, and that was their main that they would do in the wintertime, and then they would farm in the summertime. But then they used to clear the land, like Muriel said, with dynamite.
Yeah.
My dad learned how to have dynamite. He had dynamite caps and sticks of dynamite, and learned how to do that, blow up the tree stumps. And then they had oxen. They would try to pull the stumps out with the oxen. If that didn't work, then they would blow it up with dynamite. 'Cause I remember one time he took me fishing. He took a stick of dynamite and a tin can. We went down to the river, and he put it in the tin can in the river, and he blew up the river, and we had hundreds of fish. And then he had a hay truck with the horses, and then we would take a fork, and he had me go in the river and throw the fish out. He put them on the truck, on the hay truck, and then we'd take them back, and then he would clean them, and then Mom would can the fish. We put them in mason jars, and we would put them in the cellar, and that was fish.
When the dynamite went off in the water, it shocked the fish. They came belly up.
The concussion or
Right.
percussion would have
Yeah.
maybe.
Right, so that's how he fished. You know, so. And then when I was in high school and moved into town, into Mississippi Avenue, then in town, he would always like to go fishing, trout fishing. Well, he didn't want to go, we didn't have a boat or a motor or anything, so he would just take me out to Turtle River or Turtle Lake, and we'd go out there, and then I would fish, and then I learned how to trout fish. I love trout fishing. So he would take me out to some little small stream. He knew there was trout, and he would sit there and he would whittle. He liked to carve he always had a pocket knife. He would whittle with a pocket knife. And then I would go fishing, trout fishing.
He made whistles, didn't he?
Yes, he would make little whistles. So I would go trout fishing for 2 or 3, 4 hours and come back, and he'd either be sleeping or there on the ground and take me back home again. And sometimes he would meet friends of his. They would stop by, and he would have a beer with the friends and everything. And
Check oiling or cleaning it or something, and he pulled us, because he knew there wasn't a shell in it, and shot a big round hole in the bottom of the door in the kitchen. And that's how close it came. You know, it could have been, because he was sure there wasn't a shell in it.
Oh, no.
I used to love that hole because I had an earache, and if I could get down there and get that cold air in my ear,
Oh.
took the pain away. That was one thing about when you got sick, because it was hard to.
Yeah.
I can remember. Something called aconite. It was a water, and it would take the temperature down. But a lot of these kids would get pneumonia. And going back to clearing land, they wouldn't go to the hospital when the baby was born. They would have a midwife come to the house. And there was one lady that did that work. So I was born in the hospital, but so were you. But when it come time for Viola to be born, he had to look up a midwife. And he found one, and she said, "I'll come if you clear 30 acres of land on my farm."
Oh, my word.
So he spent all spring clearing land to pay
A
for
lot
it.
of
That's a
land.
lot of land to...
30 acres is
Yeah.
a lot of land.
Well, it depends how many trees you're talking about. If it's
Still, no
I
matter
suppose
what,
all he
Chris,
did
that's
was
a lot
take
of
out the
land.
trees and the bush and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a lot of land.
yeah.
30 acres. That would be expensive now. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it costs more than 4,000.
yeah, I bet.
Yeah, today.
Well, she was no pushover, this midwife.
She drove a hard bargain.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what are you going to do? How many options do you have? Not a lot.
in the time that Dad was burned, that was a rough time.
Mm.
We had a lamp that had the little white mantles on it.
Mhm.
Do you remember, see those? It burns gas, which is very dangerous, and you light the mantles. Well, the mantles are very woven white material, and they'll get a hole in them, and of course then they don't work. So we'd always have extra mantles on hand. Well, he lit the lamp one evening. I think it was Saturday. We were going to have a bath. So and somehow one of the mantles broke. So he put on a new mantle, and then you have to light them. And first they have to light them
And burn them.
be sure that they catch on fire
Yeah.
and burn. And he didn't. He should have drained the gas out of the lamp first. Well, it exploded, and it was in March, and he went out and he rolled in the snow, but the snow was crusty on top. He got some very, very bad burns, face and hands.
Yeah.
So the
Who,
hospital.
who Henry?
My dad, Henry. I remember that story. I forgot that story.
Yeah.
Muriel just said it. I
And
remember
we had
that
a
Mom told
doctor
that
book, and the
story.
doctor book said to
Yeah.
sterilize white sheets, patches, Band-Aids, I guess you'd call them, and then use lard. Well, we always had 50 pounds of lard on hand for
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
cooking. And I can remember putting those things in the oven and taking them out with a hold, they were hot, with a holder, putting them on the kitchen table and spreading them with lard.
Yeah.
And then in the morning he had a blister that hung like this on his.
Oh my God.
And we got him to Bemidji with a horse and team and a wagon.
Oh.
And then there was, wasn't Bob going to be born at that time? Sure.
I think so, yeah.
She was pregnant with Bob. Cows to milk and stuff. We had a neighbor named Van Dyke, and he was, I don't think he knew how to work, but he was very funny and loved to have him come over. And he come over and he said, I left the back out the door because my pants are, there's no seat in the bottom.
Oh.
And then Jomer come over, he was gonna do the milking and stuff, that was Dad's brother. And it had snowed real heavy, so you had to take the snow off the roof of the kitchen, because it was a lean-to,
Uh-huh.
and get the snow off. When Jomer went up to take the snow off, fell off and broke his ankle.
Oh my word.
No.
Comedy of errors.
And they told him he would never milk a cow again in the hospital. And he said he had a special nurse. And he said she worked 20 hours, just had 2 hours off during the day.
Oh.
And she'd be sound asleep on the couch on the cot beside the bed.
Uh-huh.
And he'd get up, which he wasn't supposed to do, and do like this over the bottom of the bed to run. And because his hands still have scars, kept stretching the muscles, so
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
he milked cows when he got home.
Oh.
I remember when I used to have a cold, they used to make what they call a mustard pack.
Mm-hmm.
And
What
today,
was-
no one knows what a mustard pack is.
No.
And it was something where they put a cheesecloth or something on my chest, and they filled it with mustard